Sorry? Yes, have a talk tomorrow. It's called testing, from bugs to brilliance, testing toolbox in action. It's my
Let's talk
little
about
box. Yeah.
And we are live again with the next guest. What's your name and what brings you to JCON?
Yes, so my name is François Martin, and what brings me to JCON is, on the one hand, it's my favorite conference, so I always like to come here. And I'm speaking here as well, and I'm doing free mentorings, and also I'm a volunteer here, so to help out a bit, the community here.
All things combined, do you have time to go to talks yourself?
Yes, I do. At least I try to make some time. Yes, I mean, I make a lot of use out of the hallway track from the time that I've left from, like the mentorings and the talk that I'm giving, or like, doing interviews like this, right? Which I think is very important to do. But yeah, I'm trying to take the time for the talks that I find important, but I'm really happy that JCON records all of the talks. So, at least the ones that I miss, I'm able to watch afterwards. So.
You have a toolbox here. What's the thing? How is it related to your talk?
Yeah, so my talk is called From Bugs to Brilliance, Testing Toolbox in Action. And, I thought, so, since it's called, Testing Toolbox, I thought I'd bring a real toolbox. So, of course, I was just able to travel with hand luggage. So my real toolbox didn't fit into the luggage. So I thought I'd print a little, toolbox here and use it to bring it with me. And I will also be giving one away at my talk. So, so someone can take this home as a souvenir kind of. And so people can come with their empty toolbox, just like in my case, and they can fill it up with tools. Just, they need to make sure that it doesn't get too heavy so they can't take it home with them, of course, right? So.
And which tools are important? What's the main things you talk about during the session?
So the interesting thing about this session is that I have a lot of different tools that I'm showcasing and a lot of demos, but it's kind of interactive. So I'm asking the audience basically what they would like to see in terms of what tools they deem to be important or what they think is important. I feel like it also depends on what tools you already know and you don't know. But of course, I think, there are many good basics that a lot of people don't know already, like especially in the Java ecosystem, there is like a search, for example, that, I mean, is something that a lot of people know, but there are still lots of people that don't know about it. It makes it a lot easier to write tests that are very maintainable and don't have too much logic. So, they don't contain logic that could break or like, have the risk that you introduce other bugs, into the test code, which we also obviously don't want. But then there are other tools like, for example, I have an example with test containers and with Proxy, which is kind of like a tool to simulate what happens, for example, when your connection to the database breaks. Like I had a case at a customer actually where we were having a connection to a database, and we never tested the case what happens when the database is down for some reason. And we noticed, the application was actually crashing when the database was down. And this brought me to the point where I thought like, there should be a way to test this because we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And so for me, every time I find a bug or when we have an issue, I want to reproduce it first. So to do it kind of like TDD style. And I was looking for ways to do this. And then I came up with this solution. And I think this is a brilliant tool. It's also open source. Proxy was developed by Shopify, probably to test their resilience. And it's so cool what it can do, and you would probably be surprised when you try it on your own applications to see like what kind of issues come up that you didn't expect. So
I know that, for instance, Netflix has this kind of monkeys which shut off the services in production.
yeah.
Would you go so far in testing, replacing Proxy with doing that in production?
Actually wouldn't replace it. I think both are complementary in my opinion. So the thing you mentioned is like chaos testing where, for example, you turn off a service in production and then see what happens. And I think you need to have both in a way. So you should have the Proxy, for example, to get instant feedback. So that, for example, when you do a pull request and you make a change to the code that causes, for example, now the application to crash, you don't have to wait until a chaos test catches this because still the chaos test you usually do in production or like production-like environments. And it takes quite a long time from when your code, is in development until you're there. And from that point on, when you notice, oh, suddenly the database is crashing, it will take you quite a long time to be able to figure out which of those changes that we have made, unless you deploy like every day, right? But usually most of us don't. It will take you quite a while until you find the exact change that caused this issue. And by doing this with Toxiprox, you can prevent this. But with the chaos testing, I find it especially useful to also see like how well is your staff trained, for example. I mean, to see if, for example, service goes down, do they get notified of that? And how do they react in those situations? I think it's also a good training opportunity for them in this way. And I think that is another benefit, which is why I wouldn't just do one or the other. I think both is the perfect mix that you have to do.
Is chaos testing something reserved for big companies? I can imagine if you have a small team and you're just trying to get things implemented, dealing with chaos is not something you would like to do, but is it possible as a small team to do that kind of approach?
I definitely think so. So I would say every team, at least as long as you have an application that you deploy to production, and if you are the team that maintains it, so especially if you are in the DevOps team in a small client or like small application with a small team, this could still be something that could be worth your time. I think it really depends. I mean, if your application just started out and you don't have that many customers, it's probably not as crucial. But at some point, you get to the point where you get a lot of attention and where your application starts to become like mission critical. I would say when you get to a point where you could say that you don't want to have downtime in a way, that's the point where you should start, let's say the latest with chaos testing. Because if you're at the point where you say like, oh, it's fine if our application is down for 2 or 3 hours or like 10, 15 minutes, then probably you won't really need to do chaos testing at that point. But once you get to the point where you say like, oh, even just having a downtime more than 5 minutes, would be bad for us, I think that would be a point where I would introduce it, certainly.
Something to think about and to try out the chaos testing approach. You're also a volunteer, you're also doing the hallway track. Other important evolutions you see in Java?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, for example, virtual threads is a great, revolution, I would say. I know I was visited a workshop by Venkat on virtual threads, and he also told a little bit about the story, and it was kind of interesting to hear like how long it took them to develop it, because they essentially had to rewrite almost the entirety of the Java code base to make it compatible with virtual threads. And it's kind of amazing to see how just having this change makes such a big difference for the performance of applications that don't even explicitly use make use of threading per se, and also like how easy it is to change an application that doesn't use virtual threads to using them. I think this is maybe one of the biggest changes since, of course, like streams, lambdas, and so on, I would say, in my opinion, from what I've seen.
A lot of changes, and every developer has his own favorites and what they use mostly. Yeah? Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here and your talk, and have fun for the rest of the conference.
All right. Thank you so much as well.
And great shirt, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.